We're going to start with a recap of Riyadh's season card. This past week, there was a lot of big-time fights, but most notably, above all else, was one of the best fights we've had of this century so far. What we witnessed was two of the great pound-for-pound fighters going at it, combating each other, and fighting an incredible fight. We saw Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol go 12 rounds in what will be one of the most technically sound fights that you will ever see. And that's the one I'm going to start off with today. As we know the outcome from that fight, Artur Beterbiev became undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world for the first time in 25 years, defeating Roy Jones Jr.'s record that have 3 belts at that point in time, and he became the very first champion with a grand total of 4 belts. Artur Beterbiev has solidified himself now as being a likely Hall of Fame boxer because of this weekend's performance. What happened in that fight was obviously a little bit controversial on the back end, though, because what we had a situation was that, well, Beterbiev won by majority decision. The scoring cards that involved a 114-114, 115-113, and 116-112. And that's what I want to discuss in a moment. But first of all, I want to appreciate greatness. In boxing over the past 10, 15 years, big fights weren't happening that often. Sure, they happened, but it's been 25 years since undisputed light heavyweight champion had been crowned. It was 25 years since a heavyweight undisputed champion was crowned. We've got both of those happening now within what has been 5-6 months time span now. That is huge for the boxing sport. And what we saw was an incredible fight, one that you could easily claim to be fight of the year. What happened this weekend was two guys that are truly two of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And let me say this, fast forwarding a little bit, pound for pound, they both leapfrogged Canelo Alvarez to officially become number 4 and number 5 in the pound-for-pound by Ring Magazine. Rightfully so. I was hoping that was what was going to be done because, listen, when you have two guys go at it, the way that they did, closely contested fight, where you could have gone either way, and these are against two of the top guys, both guys proved how dominant they were. Giving a guy, or disciplining a guy because of a loss would have made no sense. And so getting them number 4 and 5, rightfully deserved, and I like to see that from what they ranked there. So now you have two of the guys in the top 5 pound for pound in that fight. But let me break down what went down in this fight, because Dmitry Bivol started off hot, and then the back end of the fight, obviously, Beterbiev ended the fight stronger. And when we came to the result, I personally would have viewed it as a draw. I also could have seen it because a couple of the rounds it was very, very close. I could have seen one of the rounds, you could have flipped it, and I could have seen Bivol actually winning it. And I would be okay. I can see where one would see the perception that Beterbiev would have won as well. Not overall having a fit about any of that. End of the day, it was a close fight. No problem with the fact that Beterbiev won. Here's my problem. The 116-112 scorecard. There was no way, in any way, shape, or form, that you could have come up with a 116-112 scorecard in that fight. That had to be extreme bias to be able to make that scorecard right there. And that's my problem I want to approach today. You cannot have a scorecard of 116-112 in a fight that was as closely contested as that was. It makes no sense. Everybody you talk to says that was a great fight, closely contested, neck and neck battle, could have gone either way, and then you have a 116-112 scorecard. That is a problem with boxing. These judges need to be held accountable because this is getting ridiculous. You cannot be having a 116-112 scorecard when the fight was neck and neck, where many people could have said it was a draw, and yet you have a 116-112 scorecard. Absolutely ludicrous right there. And I think that's a massive problem that needs to be addressed, and it is what it is at the end of the day. But that's the big problem I have with what happened in that fight. Nothing else to do with anything else, just that scorecard alone. And so when we go about this, though, I want to make sure I point this out as well. So much respect is deserved towards Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol. Both guys are two of the most humble champions we have. Both guys have been incredible in the way they've handled the win or loss. Beterbiev has not been cocky, has not been prideful. He's handled it with great respect. Great respect seeing him and how he's handled this whole becoming undisputed. He's handled it great. And then for Bivol, he's handled the loss better than I think I've seen any champion handle a loss. Made no excuses. And let me stop you in your tracks right there. Some people will say, hey, Bivol's now gone and tried filing to file a protest against all 4 belt commissions to try and protest the fight. That's not going against what he did there. What's happening in that situation is trying to prevent what now we've had happen, where the IBF foolishly is trying to go make Beterbiev fight some nobody, essentially. And I know we don't want to say nobody, but essentially that's what he is. And ruin the whole undisputed thing. That's what Bivol's trying to stop here. But Bivol's made no excuses, and I have greatly appreciate what he's done there. So both respect to them. And that's why I want to say this. There is one thing that needs to stem from this fight. We need the rematch. That's all I want. Sure, I could go list some other great light heavyweight names. Sure, I could go say Beterbiev, if you could go up to cruiserweight or something would be cool. I could say all these different things. Here's what I want to see have happen. Dmitry Bivol, Artur Beterbiev, right back in Riyadh season, fighting again, undisputed championship of the world in the near future. Nothing else I'm going to even suggest there. We need this rematch. His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh has already declared that he wants to make the Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol rematch. And on top of that, as I said, Bivol, he's already protested that he wants, against all 4 sanctioning bodies, that he wants to seek an immediate rematch. Let's get the job done. We need the rematch to happen. There's not a bigger fight you could probably make in boxing still. Not only was it the biggest fight you could have made at boxing leading up to the fight, they went above and beyond, performed at such a high level, where now, once again, we're saying, hey, this is just as big of a fight, if not bigger, the second time around. We need this to happen. It's the biggest fight to make in boxing. Most certainly the biggest fight you can make for both those two guys involved. Make it happen. Get the deal done. We want to see Dmitry Bivol, Artur Beterbiev back in the ring again. That's what needs to happen. Next, co-main event, Fabio Wardley versus Frazer Clarke. This was a massive fight. We all know how good the rematch was, a potential fight of the year earlier this year on Easter, and it ended in a draw, that fight. Frazer Clarke was knocked down early in that fight. He felt the power of Fabio Wardley, but did not get KO'd. This time around, the ties changed. Fabio Wardley goes out there in round 1 and has one of the most devastating knockouts we've seen, where he legitimately puts a dent in his head for Frazer Clarke. And obviously, just an update on Frazer Clarke, though, he's going to be okay, and we'll address that in a moment. But Fabio Wardley had a brutal first-round knockout, one of the most powerful shots. Frazer Clarke could not recover from it, ended about 2 minutes, 28 seconds of the fight. Incredible round 1. Went in and in there, conquered, did his job. Fabio Wardley emerged. And what Fabio Wardley set himself up for is being one of the top talked about heavyweights now. He's now in the national, worldwide scale. He's now in that picture. So what's next for Fabio Wardley? Well, we have 3 names that I originally thought of that I'd like to see from Fabio Wardley, because he now is ranked in the top 10 heavyweights. Jared Anderson, Filip Hrgovic, Efe Ajagba. All 3 of those guys would be fights I'd like to see Fabio Wardley fight. The other one that came up recently that he's been discussed about, Deontay Wilder. I didn't think about that at first, but I started thinking, Deontay Wilder, Fabio Wardley. You know, if Wilder wants to fight still, this is the one that you have to make. Because Wardley's not necessarily established as that top tier heavyweight yet. He might be in the future, not necessarily right now. He's a good fighter. We could still get back in the mix. It's not just a stay busy fight or something along those lines, or a tune-up fight. It's a good fighter that's not necessarily fully established yet. Where that would be the best situation for Wilder to go out there and fight. And if he fights and wins against Fabio Wardley, he's right back on track to try to move his way back up and get back into position to do something. If he loses to Fabio Wardley, it's officially over for his career. Interesting predicament there. And Fabio Wardley said he's all for that fight. I'm not against that fight as well. So those are really the 4 names I'm looking at right there. If I were to emphasize them, Jared Anderson, Efe Ajagba, Deontay Wilder would probably be my top 3 favorites right there. Hrgovic would not mind that one as well. But I'm alluded to the fact for Frazer Clarke. Obviously, this is a sport. It's a brutal sport. Things can happen in boxing. And unfortunately, we saw that happen with Frazer Clarke. Thankfully, though, he underwent successful surgery to repair his jaw and cheekbone after the KO that night. It was confirmed that it was successful. And then Frazer Clarke came out now and recently just said this exact quote I'm going to read for it, basically saying that he's not going to retire. He says this: "I hold my hands up. My team did a fantastic job. It was my mistake and it cost me. My pride is still dented now, but the fighter is in me knows that I will be back. I'm 33, but I'm in the prime of my life. I'm the fittest now than I've ever been in my whole career. So I'm not looking for it to be over. If anything, it's just a blip in the road." Here's the thing, guys. Boxing's a brutal sport. You have a life beyond boxing. I'm not a doctor. I don't have any idea what the medical report, so I don't know exact damage that he took on that fight. I know what we saw, but I don't know everything else. He needs to take time off. I don't want to see him back in the ring for at least 6, 7, 8 months, bare minimum. And I hope he's truly thinking about that and knows that that's the best decision for him. Because there's a life bigger than boxing. And that's ultimately going to be up to his decision to make there. Nobody else can make that for him. But that's just the fact of the matter. and hopefully takes the proper time off, recovers properly, and if he decides to make a return, he makes it at the right way and gets ready for the next chapter of his career. Then we go to the next event that was on the card, Jai Opetaia, Jack Massey. This was a dominant outing from Jai Opetaia. Listen, I'm going to go just say this real quickly. We'll break down the fight actually first of all. Opetaia had his belt on the line, the IBF in the ring, cruiserweight titles were on the belt. He had a 6-round stoppage of Jack Massey, who his corner threw in the towel in that fight, and it was just a beat down the entire fight. Now, I can't forget, Opetaia had to change his corner this fight by having his dad in camp this time, has not been a part of the past 2. Here's what I want to say about Jai Opetaia. Jai Opetaia is, in my opinion, one of the more underrated fighters in boxing. I understand he's respected by those that know boxing really well. But the whole world doesn't give him the props and credit that he deserves. Jai Opetaia is an electric fighter. He's a guy that, listen, he should have his eyes set on becoming undisputed at cruiserweight. Because not only should he have his eyes set on that, I think he will become undisputed at cruiserweight. Jai Opetaia is dominant. He's talented. Everybody that he goes and fights, he puts on an absolute clinic on, and he shows that he is clearly better than and supreme over every other fighter that he fights against. He is one of the premier guys, not just at cruiserweight, but in boxing, in my opinion. I absolutely love what Jai Opetaia brings to the table, and I think that Jai Opetaia has a very, very bright future in this sport, where I truly do believe that potentially by the end of 2025 or early 2026, there will be an undisputed cruiserweight champion, and I believe the one holding that crown will be Jai Opetaia. So what's next for Jai Opetaia? How does he reach that pinnacle I just mentioned to and alluded to? Well, he's got to have his eyes set on becoming undisputed, and therefore, there's a path to that happening. CBS, Gilberto Ramirez, will be fighting very soon, and those two guys will then unify the belts, and we'll have essentially 3 champions remaining. Opetaia then has the option of doing a couple different options here. 1, go fight the WBC champion currently, Noah Mikhailanen. That could be an option for him to go pursue, make a fight there. Then you have Jai Opetaia having 2 belts. You'd have the winner of CBS and Gilberto Ramirez having 2 belts. Those guys go fight for undisputed. Could have that go down that way. Or CBS winner, the CBS Gilberto Ramirez fight winner, go fight at Opetaia. Opetaia then has 3 belts, and then you go fight for the final one. Either way, you can't have your mind on anything else but getting undisputed. And listen, I understand the report that just came out. IBF is mandating him to go fight another guy. Ridiculous. IBF needs to go settle down and just shut up and go do their own thing. It's getting ridiculous what the IBF is doing. 2 ridiculous mandatory that they're going out and requiring today. You have the first one disrupting the undisputed light heavyweight championship fight. And now you're upsetting and ruining potentially the cruiserweight fights. Stop with this garbage. The IBF needs to go quiet down, understand what's going on, and just step aside for a little bit. Let the job happen that needs to be done. And this is the big problem why I think Turkey, His Excellency, he needs to be able to go get this ultimate thing done where the belts are over with, we have one main belt, and we're fighting for that belt. Because this organization like the IBF doing the garbage that they're doing the past couple of days is getting ridiculous. Stop yanking these belts from everybody. You did it for the heavyweight. You've done it for countless other guys before. Just quit it out. It's garbage. Stop doing it. You're ruining and impacting boxing in a negative light. Let's continue this now. The next fight in the card, Chris Eubank Jr., Kamil Szeremeta. Here's another fight that, guess what, was a dominant performance by Chris Eubank. Dropped him first in the early rounds. He ended up knocking him down and knocking him out permanently. In the 7th round, he floored Szeremeta 4 times in total that fight. It was a blow to the body that ultimately ended the fight, but it was just a matter of time. The clock was ticking until the fight was over. Eubank made a statement in that fight. First time fighting in over a year. First time he switched trainers to Jonathan Brooks this time around. And listen, there's not much else to discuss. He looked good. It was not really a big fight for him overall. It was more of a tune-up fight. He hasn't fought in a year. Was there any rust? He shut all that off. He proved himself, looked good. Here's what really set himself up for, though. Chris Eubank went out there, fought a good fighter, but we saw it in the days leading up with Conor Benn situation. We've known the history between those two, and it was obviously kind of scripted, I think. But let's just be honest, it was scripted. You had Neymar situation there. You had them all get in the ring, and right after their fight, Conor Benn just runs up there, and we have this big face-off in the ring, Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. I think we all know what's going to happen. I could list other guys I'd prefer and would like Chris Eubank to possibly go fight, but the biggest fight, specifically domestically, is Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. I don't think there's any debate in that discussion right there. I think we all want to see that fight happen. It would be huge in the UK. Absolutely huge. I mean, that doesn't get much bigger than that domestically. And ultimately, it's also a good fight as well. It's going to be a great fight in the middleweight division, and it'll be great to see. Can I mention one thing hypothetically, though? And I get it. I know it's not going to happen. They already said it's rumored for the February 22nd card in Riyadh season, so it won't probably happen. But could we just imagine for a second a main event, Wembley Stadium, rematch of AJ Dubois, co-main event, Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn. I mean, come on now. It doesn't get much better than that possibly. So I would love to see that. I understand it's probably not going to happen, but that would be something I would love to see occur if that could possibly be made. Let's go to the next fight on that card in Riyadh season. Skye Nicolson. She defeats Raven Chapman, and pretty much a clear-cut defeat there. Unanimous decision, and she won on the scorecards 99-91, 98-92, 98-92 on the scorecards there. And let me just be honest right there. Skye Nicolson was great. She was very, very successful. It was the very first women's fight in general, but also women's championship fight on the Riyadh season card. And she showed out, moving her record to 11-0 in her career now. She made, or 12-0 in her career now. She made a great statement. She was in dominant control the entirety of that fight. She's a fun fighter to watch as well. And let's just be honest right now. There's one name she keeps talking about. There's one name I think we all want to see. Skye Nicolson, Amanda Serrano. Make it happen. That's a big fight we could see occur potentially down the line. All right. The final one I need to discuss on the Riyadh season card is one I'm going to get deep into. There is a lot to discuss in regards to what happened in the first fight of the main cards occurring in the Riyadh season this past weekend. Ben Whittaker, Liam Cameron. Light heavyweight fight. What a interesting scenario that was. Ben Whittaker got out there and probably won the first round or two, but the tide was quickly shifting, and Liam Cameron was coming out, and you could tell he was winning the rounds then, and it looked like he was turning the tide where it was only going to go downhill for Ben Whittaker at that point going forward, and it was only going uphill for Liam Cameron. And then we have an interesting situation occur. Round 5 comes to a conclusion, and I'm not one that speculates. I'm not one that makes rumors, nor am I one that spreads false information. I go by facts. What happened was two dudes, Liam Cameron, Ben Whittaker, were tumbling over the ropes, something I don't know how many times has ever been done before in boxing. Can't recall too many of those instances. Go tumbling over the ropes. Medical teams come out. They both get hurt minorly to some extent. Ben Whittaker just doesn't get up. And what ends up happening is Ben Whittaker then gets wheelchaired on out, goes to the hospital, supposedly has a sprained ankle, and he has potentially something aggravated, a neck injury possibly from previously. I'll discuss that in a moment. And that's what occurs. I personally have not seen anything like that. I've seen people purposely try losing, getting out of a fight. Actually, that happened just this weekend, I believe, but this was interesting. And let me just break this down real quickly, because there's a lot of things I want to talk about this. Actually, before I break it down, let me say this point. What happened was Ben Whittaker, in terms of the injury update from Ben Shalom, his promoter says this. Ben Whittaker is undergoing further assessments on his neck as a previous injury was aggravated by the fall. He also experienced an ankle sprain and will begin a rehab process as soon as he is cleared by doctors and is determined to be back in the ring as soon as possible. Okay. Beyond that, Ben Shalom has also come out now and alluded to the fact that he's going to have to recover. He doesn't know how long it's going to take. Beyond that, he's going to make changes to his mentality and changes to his team. And so that likely means that I don't think we're going to get a rematch. However, that's foolish and ridiculous. And so let me break down this fight now that we're going to get into it. What happened in this fight was a guy in Ben Whittaker who, let me say this. I'll be honest with you guys. I love Ben Whittaker. I am and was a huge, huge fan of Ben Whittaker heading into this fight. I love what he brought to the table. I was excited about Ben Whittaker. I was excited because I thought he was very, very talented, and I was entertained by every time he fought. I'm very disappointed in what I saw. And here's the reason why. I'm going to exclude the whole incident that occurred, because I don't know exactly what all happened. I don't know proof. I can make assumptions, but that's just assumptions at the end of the day, meant for debate. Here's what I know. Leading up to the week, and I said this in the preview of Riyadh season card. I previewed this and I said, I was interested why Ben Whittaker kept saying this statement. He kept saying that he can actually box, and he actually prefers to be a real boxer in the ring. And he kept bringing up this point that, hey, I was a silver medalist in the 2020 Olympics. I know how to box. I'm fundamentally sound. I don't need to do all the showboating. And I was wondering that. I'm like, okay, great, cool story. Why do you keep talking about that? I didn't think that much of it, but I thought of it enough to the point where I brought that up in the preview for the show. And we get out there, and here was the problem for me. The biggest stage that Ben Whittaker's been on his entire career, a worldwide stage, and he goes out there, and he was not himself. Regardless of what was happening that night, whether he was outclassed, whether Liam Cameron's just 10 times better than him, whatever the case might have been, he was not himself. And I know that because he walked out there and he truly was trying to box. And I understand a lot of people will say, okay, the showboating is ridiculous. Hopefully he stops doing the showboating. Listen, that can be your opinion. It's worked in times past with the Drunken Master style. And so far in his career, it's done wonders for himself. It is very, very difficult for an opposing fighter to try to game plan against a guy that has that type of style. It's almost impossible to game plan against it. It can work, but it's very, very difficult. And that's what Ben Whittaker's done throughout all 8 of his fights leading up to that fight. And then he walks into this fight, and he's stiff as a board. He's not moving in any way, shape, or form. Not only is he not dancing and showboating and doing all this crazy stuff, he's just staying there, and he looks stiff. He's not moving around. He's not loose. He's just very, very stiff. He does not look good at all. And yes, he might have won some of the earlier rounds, but he didn't even attempt to be the Ben Whittaker we all know. The one that made him famous, the one that made him so talented, which is why I have to beg the question, what was going on with the fight? Was that really the game plan? And if so, why? And secondly, what was he doing in the ring? And why did he not change anything when he started getting going? It made no sense from the get-go, and I was confused from round 1 to round 3. And then when the tide started turning, I'm like, well, I don't know what he's going to do now. And, well, what he ends up doing is he flips over the ropes and ends the fight. It made absolutely no sense to me what Ben Whittaker was attempting to do in that fight there. It blew my mind, in fact, because it made absolutely no sense why that would be your approach to go in there and fight a completely different style than you ever have done before. And on top of that, you're not only trying to do this new style essentially against Liam Cameron, but you're doing it looking bad. It was not a good game plan whatsoever. It was destined to fail, and it clearly was going to happen. And so, yes, it ends up being a draw in this fight. And so all I have to say about this is, listen, this has to be a rematch. I understand what I just alluded to a few moments ago, that Ben Shalom is reportedly trying to go talk into getting changes in Ben Whittaker's team and changing that group around, changing the mentality, so on and so forth, just to heal up. We need the rematch happening. If Ben Whittaker goes and fights some other dude not named Liam Cameron, that's going to be a problem. And all I'm going to say is, regardless of the allegations or not, we cannot deny the fact that Ben Whittaker's image has been tarnished vastly over the past 5 days now. Because not only do people have their own beliefs of what occurred in the ring that night, but on top of that, what we found out proof was that he punched a hole in the wall when he got back to his dressing room. That's not a good sign. That's not a good look either. And then we find out, we see this, we hear allegations that he reportedly took a phone and decided to go in and smash it. That's not a good look either. And so it's been reputation hit after reputation hit. And remember, this is a guy that is famous because of his style, and he's been great at building his brand. Which is why I once again beg the question, what happened? What was going on with his mental state? Because this was not the Ben Whittaker we grew to know and love. This guy was so calm, cool, collected, has great aura about him. It all just fizzled out of the room. It was just depleted from the time he got in the ring to today. And that's why there's a necessity that Ben Whittaker needs to do this rematch. There cannot be another fight that Ben Whittaker goes and pursues. It must be Liam Cameron, and it has to happen. And listen, Liam Cameron's reputation has skyrocketed. He's signed by Queensberry Promotions now. And when we look at that from that perspective, Liam Cameron has now garnered the respect of countless people around the world. And if we're going to be honest, in a rematch, I think a lot of people are going to be going for Liam Cameron now. It is what it is. It's the boxing game. But that is why Ben Whittaker needs to go out there, get ready for that fight, make the rematch happen, and prove who he is. Put on a Ben Whittaker masterpiece and show the world who Ben Whittaker is. And if he doesn't, well, you guys can already guess what's going to happen from that. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be a snowball effect that will derail his career greatly. So he needs to make the rematch happen. There's no other ifs, ands, or buts about that. And so that concludes the Riyadh season recap of what happened in Saudi Arabia this past weekend. Now, before Saudi Arabia got underway and we saw the Riyadh season card go down, there was a fight that happened in Japan. Sivenathi, Nontshinga, he had his fight against Masamichi, Yabuki, and this was a great, great fight. Masamichi Yabuki came away and took Nontshinga's IBF World Light Flyweight Championship belt from him. And in that, he scored 3 knockdowns and forced a stoppage at 150 of round 9. Yabuki now has become a 2-time junior flyweight titleist, and he had an upset win over an exciting 108 title holder in Nontshinga. Here's the deal about this fight. Yabuki made his mark. He made a statement. He was dominant. He was the best fighter. Nontshinga had a couple good rounds in there. About round 4, so I'd say he was winning it, and then Yabuki came back and ended the round with power. Yabuki was in control from the start to finish. He was more powerful. He was on top of the game. He had a game plan. He executed that game plan to perfection. And now there's a lot of hype about Yabuki. Being a 2-time champion now is going to be quite the name to his resume. And what I want to say is this. There's a option for what he's going to do next now, because he's a great fighter, KO artist. He's had a lot of big time things in his career so far. What do I see next for him? Well, we saw a guy fight this weekend as well. I'm going to talk about a little bit. Shakawi Iwata. That's the fight I want to see him make. Unify the belts at flyweight. That's a massive fight to make. I would love to see him make that fight right then and there. Then, what's next for Nontshinga? Well, you have 2 vacant belts currently available at 108. The WBC, the WBA. Go pursue one of those. Go get a belt back. You're already a 2-time world champion at 25 years old. There's a lot of fine-tuning he could do towards his game, but he's still extremely talented, and I like to see him what he's capable of doing. So go get that belt again. You could become a 3-time world champion. Not out of the question. WBC, WBA are vacant currently. Go find and try to get one of those other belts. You could possibly try to go for a rematch. I don't think he's going to get it, though, because it was quite a lopsided affair there. But that's what I've got for that fight right then and there. Then we're going to head over to October 13th, day 1 of the top-ranked world title fights. And this one had a massive day out there in Japan. We're going to start with the main event from that night. Takuma Inoue versus Seiya Tsutsumi. This was one of the fights that people could say could be fight of the year as well. Absolute masterclass by Tsutsumi. Great fight overall by Inoue. Neck and neck battle. Could have possibly gone either way. Ultimately, Tsutsumi won, though, taking Takuma Inoue's belt by a 12-round unanimous decision. Here's the deal of what went down in this fight, though. Well, this fight was neck and neck. Tsutsumi ultimately got what maybe would have been a controversial knockdown later in the rounds there. However, he got the knockdown. And he won the fight against Inoue, which makes it to be a massive, massive upset this year. Why do I say that? Well, in weeks leading up to this fight, I said this statement because of what we heard from Naoya Inoue, that for Junto Nakatani, Naoya Inoue mega fight to occur, what needs to happen first is that Junto will win this weekend's fight, which he did, we'll talk about momentarily, but he also needs to go pursue Takuma Inoue, unify there, beat Naoya Inoue's brother, and then he can go get the mega fight against Naoya. Well, Takuma just lost. Changes plans drastically from that standpoint. But here's what I hope happens. While, yes, it's no longer going to be Takuma Inoue, he's out of the picture, Tsutsumi has made his mark now in boxing. I want to see this fight. Tsutsumi, Nakatani next. You still unify the belts at bantamweight, and it would be a mega, mega fight to make in Japan. It's also a massive fight that I think everybody would want to watch. It would be a huge fight to see occur right there. And at that point in time, if Junto beats Tsutsumi, then you could also discuss the same game plan still. Then you can go fight Naoya if that's the game plan, but I'll discuss his game plan later on. So that's what I want for Tsutsumi. I see no other option other than unifying chip belts. Most likely, you have to go after Junto. That's the big fight to make. That's the biggest one I want to see occur. You could go after the other belts as well and unify that way. I don't see another option. Junto Nakatani, Tsutsumi is one of the biggest fights you can make over there in Japan right now. What's next for Takuma Inoue, who was the guy that most regarded, the top 30 or so pound guy, a very, very talented guy overall? He got upset. You could pursue a potential rematch against Tsutsumi. Would not be opposed to that. It was an incredible fight. Neck and neck there. Or he goes after the IBF or the WBO belts. Both those options are very possible and would not be against either one of those outcomes either. The fight right before them, the co-main event of that night, Kenshiro Teraji versus Cristofer Rosales. This was an overall great fight and a dominant performance by Teraji. Teraji's WBA and WBC light flyweight titles were on the line there. And in that fight, round 11 comes and he TKOs Cristofer Rosales. He becomes the vacant WBC flyweight title holder. So what this means now that Teraji is now a 2-weight champion. Amazing Boy also broke Rosales' nose earlier on in that fight. And from that point on, it was kind of game over. It was an intriguing fight there, to say the least. But he certainly did make his mark in that fight. And we can just see that was obviously a situation where Rosales had great determination. He fought through a lot of pain, a lot of stuff. He showed his warrior mentality. Teraji was just the better fighter. He made a statement that night. What's next for Teraji now? Well, here's what I've got. Unify. You've got a lot of options here. A lot of guys that just fought this past weekend at flyweight. Seigo Yuri Akui, WBA. Angel Ayala, IBF. Anthony Osquaga, WBO. Unify against one of those guys, get 2 belts. I think Teraji is probably the best in that division. We'll see, obviously. You could make a debate. I think Akui is also very, very talented there as well. But unify against one of those guys. That's got to be the next game plan for Teraji. Let's go down to the other guys that could possibly be the best guy at light flyweight. Seigo Yuri Akui. He goes out there and his WBA flyweight title was on the line that fight. And he defeats Tachinachi Kuropak That was also a decent fight overall. I wouldn't say it was a drastic statement, though, overall. He retains his belt. It was a split decision in that fight. But once again, similar to what I just said for Teraji, his next game plan has got to be simple. You have unifying on your mind. Go after a few different guys you can go pursue. Angel Ayala, IBF, Anthony Alasquala, or Kenshiro Teraji. The biggest fight thing you can make right there is Kenshiro Teraji versus Sigayuri Akui. That is the biggest fight you can make right there for that division. I would love to see those two guys unify. But either way, just go unify in your next fight. Both guys made the mark. Both guys proved themselves, defended the belts. Let's go unify now. That's got to be the next chapter for both of them. Let's go to the next fight. The very first fight of that day. And that fight was Shokiya Iwata versus Jairo Noriega. For the vacant WBO light flyweight title, Shokiya Iwata defeated Jairo by TKO round 3 of that fight. He won the vacant WBO light flyweight title. Obviously a quick in and out display. Showed his dominance, showed his power. It was a brutal knockout as well. Great fight though in that fight right there. He was dominant from start to finish. Had Noriega in a pickle there. He was not going to get out of that fight. It was a dominant showing from start to finish. And the TKO round 3 was not shocking at all. Here's what I got next for Iwata. You have one big thing to unify. Masamichi Yabuki. I just talked about it a few moments ago. I believe that Yabuki is the best person in that weight class. I think what he did against Nontshinga was a dominant display, and I think he's the real deal. Iwata's another great guy as well. Both those guys have the belts currently, and I want to see those two guys unify. That would be a massive, massive fight you could make once again in Japan. That would be a huge fight to see. I'm all for seeing that fight go down. Let's go to day 2 now of this top-ranked fight card out there in Japan, and we're going to go with the main event for that night. The final one that wrapped up all the fights of this great weekend. Junto Nakatani, Pech Chapatana for the Nakatani's WBC bantamweight titles were on the line. And let me just break down this fight for us. Junto Nakatani walks out of this fight and in utter domination essentially was in control of the whole fight. I know the scorecard supposedly said that Pech had a couple rounds in there maybe. I would have had Junto winning all 6 rounds up until the knockout. You could make a debate, sure. He was a little bit slow. I know you're just trying to dissect it and get the information, analyze the information, and break down Pech Chapatana in those early rounds there. It was a little bit slow start, though. But you could see, all of a sudden, everything clicked. I'd say round 4, back into round 4, round 5 a little bit, and then round 6, he went all out. And in that fight, we saw the power of Junto Nakatani. We saw his overall elite pound-for-pound greatness, and why he is a guy that's regarded by most people in the top 10 pound-for-pound lists. And I like the display that we saw from Junto Nakatani. It was a great display. He showed us how talented he was, and he had a great display this weekend. And it sets up something for an exciting future for Junto Nakatani. All the hype was, I alluded to a few moments ago, was Junto Nakatani going and fighting Takuma Inoue. The winner of that fight, obviously, if Junto won that fight at least, would go fight Naoya Inoue, one of the biggest fights you could make in the boxing world. That's now scratched. Inoue is now off the table. And so now we have to look at is the fight that I just said I want to see. Junto Nakatani, unify bantamweight, Seiya Tsutsumi. That's the biggest thing you can make. That is the second best guy, I'd say, in that division. And I would love to see Tsutsumi versus Nakatani. Absolutely would be a great show right there you want to see there. And ultimately, your attempt should be to go for undisputed. That's what I want to see. I want Junto Nakatani to become undisputed at 118 because I think he can do that. He's the best fighter at 118, and I understand the big appeal of going up possibly and fighting Naoya Inoue, or the other option is having Bam come up and fight you at 118. What I want to see is Junto become undisputed. And here's my game plan, okay? There are 2 options I just alluded to, though. Next step, regardless of what it needs to be, Junto Nakatani should go fight Tsutsumi. That's the next fight to make. Beyond that, though, let's look at the game plan that I've set for Junto Nakatani, what I'd like to see from him. While Nakatani has officially solidified himself as a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, what I want to see him do is that he has to make a decision. After you fight Tsutsumi, most likely, what do you do next? Do you then go forth and you pursue Naoya Inoue by moving up a weight class and going to 122? Or do you look for Bam Rodriguez to step up to 118, bantamweight, and fight you there? Here's my outlook I want to say for this fight. If I'm Junto Nakatani, here's what I'm trying to do. I fight Tsutsumi, I beat him. You're going to then try going for undisputed at 118 if that can be done. If you can't get it done realistically, then you say, okay, I just beat Tsutsumi, I already got 2 belts now at 118. I'm ready for the next step up. I don't want Inoue yet. No, not at that right now. Because let me be honest with you guys. Naoya Inoue would destroy Junto Nakatani at this point in time. The reason I say that is because Naoya Inoue is already better than Junto Nakatani, in my opinion. On top of that, Inoue already weighs more. He's already more accustomed to 122. And if anything, Naoya Inoue could also move up a weight class. It'd be moving up a weight class to a guy that's already better than Junto Nakatani. Not the best situation for him to go and fight in today. So wait a little bit more time for that fight. Bam Rodriguez. He's the guy that I think pound for pound is better than Junto Nakatani. I think Bam Rodriguez is number 6 pound for pound fighter in my opinion, right behind the 4 undisputed guys, Dmitry Bivol. I could easily say him and Bivol could flip flop as well. That would be huge though, because while Bam is better pound for pound, Bam also weighs lower. He's gonna be the one making the weight jump up to you. If you get the Bam Rodriguez Junto Nakatani fight, you can make a debate that would be just as big, if not bigger, than Naoya Inoue, depending on the marketplace you're in. If you're in Japan, we're not debating that one. If you're in America, Junto's already fought a few times in stateside in the West, and you've had the opportunity now where Bam obviously has predominantly always been in the West, and out here in America, that could be a huge fight you could do in multiple locations. So worldwide, that could be a bigger appeal potentially, right? However, go for undisputed. Go to Tsutsumi, undisputed possibly at 118. If you can't get undisputed after you fight Tsutsumi, bring Bam up, do a mega fight somewhere in America, and you do Junto Nakatani, Bam Rodriguez. At that point in time, saying he beats Bam Rodriguez, then you decide at that point, am I ready to go fight Naoya Inoue? And you either decide to go, then try to complete the undisputed championship at 118, or you move up to 122 and either fight Naoya Inoue right away, or you wait to go fight one guy first at 122 and then fight Inoue. Regardless, though, the last guy in this puzzle piece should be Naoya Inoue. I would love to see Junto Nakatani versus Inoue. However, I think we can wait. Inoue's not going anywhere for a couple more years. If we look at Junto Nakatani versus Inoue in middle to late 2026, I'm all good with that. I think that's the timeline we should look at for that fight. I would hope to see Bam Rodriguez by the end of next year, and hopefully, assuming we see early next year, whatever the case may be. So, a lot of things on the table, though. Junto Nakatani, regardless, though, solidified himself. He's a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. He showed a dominant performance. He got the KO in round 6. Great showing by Junto Nakatani, and he's got all kinds of stuff on the table now for mega fights, big paydays, and opportunities to continue to move his way up the pound-for-pound list. Let's go to the fight. Also, the other championship fight on that card that night. Kosei Tanaka versus Famulele Kafu. This was an interesting fight as well. Tanaka's WBO super flyweight title was on the line in this fight, and there was an opportunity here for Famulele to go out there and have a chance to dispute and become a world champion. And that's exactly what he did. When we look back at this fight, it could have gone either way. When I look at the beginning portions of the fight, I really thought that Famulele was going to be the guy that was winning. I thought he was dominant in the early portions. There was a swing that happened for Tanaka, though. He looked better the second half stretch. I would have been okay with either way that fight would have gone down. However, it was a great fight, and it's one of those situations where both fighters looked great. It wasn't that one guy looked worse than the other. It was that both guys looked very good, and they produced at a high level, making it to be a great fight overall that night. And when I talk about those two guys right there, you, like I said, could have gone either way. But Kafu, he is the new champion at flyweight, super flyweight. My apologies. And he won by split decision, 114-113, 114-113, 113-114 were the scorecards there. And so obviously a great fight overall right there. I was highly entertained by that fight. I learned a lot of respect for Kafu, and I like what they were able to bring to the table right there. Tanaka also, though, by no means is he off the table. He had a great performance. I think he'll be a champion once again down the line. So what's next then for Kafu? Well, Fernando Martinez to unify would be my number one option for him. Roman Gonzalez, the number one challenge contender right now, would be also a challenge for me. Then, you could look down the line. Here's the fight you could make. Famulele, Bam Rodriguez. Listen, this is not the fight I want to see next. Famulele should probably go pursue Fernando Martinez, like I said, to unify first, and then Roman Gonzalez. Bam Rodriguez is special. Bam Rodriguez is a number 6 in my opinion. I would be fine saying number 5 as well. He is the real deal. And I don't think anybody's really competing with Bam Rodriguez. We're talking about the only person people I think really could challenge Bam Rodriguez right now is Nakatani at 118. And if it ever happens in the future, obviously I'm like Naoya Inoue at 122. There's not a lot of guys that's going to be able to challenge Bam Rodriguez. He is that good. And so if I'm Famulele, go for undisputed or go for unification first against Fernando Martinez or defend against Roman Gonzalez, and Bam can come later on the table. If that's going to be something where you say, Bam, hey, go for undisputed and you go fight this fight. If Famalela still is the champion, Bam Rodriguez Famalela late next year or something, that could see that one happening. But Bam is obviously on the table. If you get that opportunity for a big money fight, you're going to take it. It would be a big fight regardless. But that's what I got next for Cafu. Then we're going to end with a downside note. The very first fight of day 2 of the top rank Japan card was a disappointment. Can I say, actually, let me go beyond that. It was a disgrace. Anthony Alaskawa, Jonathan Gonzalez. Alaskawa's WBO flyweight title was on the line. And this fight ends in a technical draw. No contest. Can I explain how irritating this is for a fighter? You put in the training camp that you went through, you put in the travel time, everything you had to go through, all the sacrifices you made, and you want the payday, yes, but you want to win, you want to fight, you want to be victorious, defend that belt, and grow your name and your brand and your image. You want to do that as a fighter. And what happened in this fight was you have a no contest for a reason that, let me be honest, listen, I don't like rumors, I don't want to do that. Jonathan Gonzalez, it just shocked me what happened in that. You accidentally bump heads. Supposedly, there was something that hindered him from seeing now after the bumped heads, the collision. He couldn't see out of his round eye. And after round 1, the fight's over. No contest. Essentially wasting everybody's time involved in that fight preparation. And here's what bothers me. For fighters like Jonathan Gonzalez, you worked your whole life to get to a standpoint where you have the opportunity to fight for a world title. And you didn't want to push through that. And I don't want to judge. Maybe it's true. Maybe he couldn't have seen it. It would have been an ugly defeat anyways. I don't know the truth. I don't want to judge too harshly. It just shocks me that you were, and if it is true that he just could not see, then that is unfortunate. That you work your whole life to be able to get to a standpoint where you're on a world championship stage and you decide to drop out after the first round to your eye being accidentally bumped. If that truly is the case, then that just is unfortunate. But it just baffles me that we've seen so many nasty cuts, so many nasty collisions, and guys fight through it. And you're talking about a championship fight, a chance to win a belt, and after round 1, you're done. Just shocked me. So Anthony Alaskawa, he holds on to his championship belt, and what's next for him? Obviously, not doing a rematch against Jonathan Gonzalez. There's no point in that one. So what's next for him? Once again, we go back to these guys that have fought a lot the flyweight title now. Unify. Angel Ayala for the IBF, Sigo Yuriakui for WBA, Kenshiro Teraji, WBC. That for me right there, those are your options. All those guys that we just had, you had 3 of those guys fight at the flyweight title, have championship belts, all fought this past weekend, all held their ground and all retained their championship belts. Now it's time to go and unify. Unify that division at flyweight can be done. I hope to see that next. So that's my recap for this weekend. But my final thing I want to give you guys before I wrap up this show is I'm going to give you guys a top 10 real quick. I want to give you guys a little rankings before we end the show up tonight. And what that is this weekend was stacked with performances. So many great card fights I just broke down over the past little while of time now. And I came up with a list of 10 top performers from this weekend. And I'll give you guys a little bit insight into this list. This weekend consisted of 11 championship fights. I'm only going to give you guys my top 10 performers of the weekend. That means somebody that won a championship this weekend isn't going to be on my list, at least one. And then we added in all the other big-time fights that happened that made big-time statements and performances that weren't even championship fights this weekend. So let me just be honest right now. All the guys listed in this top 10 of my rankings could easily have been a top 5 or higher any other week in boxing. But because of how stacked this weekend was, some guys are going to have to be number 10. Some guys are going to get left off. And I hate to do that, but that's what I have to do for this top 10 because of how elite and stacked this past weekend was of boxing. So here we are, my top 10 performances of the weekend. 10 guys in order that performed at the highest level that impressed me the most. Let's get right to it. Number 10, Kenshiro Teraji. He came out and made a massive statement, retained his championship belt, and he had a great win in his victory. At number 9, Chris Eubank Jr. Kamil Szeremeta, he comes out there and he defeats him by TKO. He defeats him after dropping him multiple times for the fight. His first fight in over a year. He comes out, shows that there's no rust whatsoever. He's ready to go and continue his dominance and ready for the next big fight. Then we have the next fight. At number 8, Famalela Kafu. He had a great display out there in what was one of the best fights of the weekend in my opinion. A closely contested fight, split decision fight against Seiya Tanaka. But in that fight, he showed why he is one of the up-and-coming great fighters in his weight class. He showed his weight, how talented he is, how explosive he is, and why he has a very, very bright future. Number 7, Masamichi Yabuki, the guy that started off the entire weekend of fights in a dominant display of elite power, dropping out the former champion, taking a belt, and becoming a new world champion for the second time of his career. Number 6, Junto Nakatani, a guy that I could easily have put number 5. He's about split with my number 5 option. The reason I had to put him at number 6 is simply because of the fact that it just happened to last a little bit longer than number 5 did, and it was a little bit slower from the get-go. But regardless, Junto Nakatani could easily be number 1 in any other week in boxing. This week is stacked. 6th round, TKO, dominant performance, shows his power, shows how talented he is, and solidified himself as a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Number 5, Skye Opetaia. Another guy that I could say easily could have been a top 3 or maybe even the best fighter in most boxing weekends. Absolutely dismantled Jack Massey this past weekend. He put on an absolute masterclass from round 1 to the time he TKO'd him, and the towel was thrown into the ring. This was a dominant display by Skye Opetaia. He showed why he is one of the premier fighters in boxing going forward the cruiserweight division, and he has a very, very bright future. Number 4, Fabio Wardley, the man that had debatably the KO of the year on Frazer Clarke. A round 1 destructive TKO. He had a rematch in this fight after the draw that happened earlier this year, and he came out and made a massive, massive statement to show why he has now solidified himself and put himself on the worldwide scale of being a top 10 heavyweight fighter in the world. Number 3, Seiya Tsutsumi. Pulled off one of the biggest upsets of this weekend, one of the biggest upsets of this year, by dethroning Takuma Inoue and messing up all the plans that people had set for Takuma Inoue versus Junto Nakatani, eventually leading to a Junto Nakatani versus Inoue fight in the future. He said, no, that's not how it's going to happen in my book. I'm going to be a champion. I'm going to take this belt from Takuma Inoue, and I'm going to show you guys how great I am. He had one of the best fights of the entire weekend, and he showed why he is an elite fighter and now one of the premier guys in the bantamweight division. Number 2, this one might shock some people right now because guess what? Dmitry Bivol. He might have lost this weekend, but let me just make this very, very clear. I personally thought it was a draw or Bivol might have won this fight. By no means can I say that he then was not having a great performance. He was one of the top guys in the world. He rightfully deserved to jump his name up into the top 5 of the pound-for-pound list, become the number 5 pound-for-pound list on the Ring magazine list for a reason. Because he had no weaknesses. He dominated in this fight. His performance was elite. There's very, very few performances you could do that for. And listen, I'm somebody that hates saying that losers are winners in fights. This fight, we were all winners. This fight had a situation where 2 guys are the elite of the elite, closely contested fight, and I walked away impressed with Dmitry Bivol. I walked away saying, you know what? Bivol can hang with the best of them. He's that real deal. There is nothing disputing that. He is truly one of the elite fighters of this generation. So I cannot say that he's not a great performer. He looked incredible in that fight, and so I had to put him at number 2. And number 1, the man that became the first undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world in 25 years. And he's the very first light heavyweight champion to ever hold all 4 belts at one time. That man is Artur Beterbiev, the man that defeated Dmitry Bivol on points and had an incredible display. He was able to win the fight in a way that most people at the time before the fight leading up to it didn't think was going to happen. Although many people believe that Beterbiev's only path to victory was to TKO Dmitry Bivol, he showed that no, I'm just as skilled as I am powerful. And I'm able to beat Dmitry Bivol, one of the most skilled fighters, not the most skilled fighter in all the world, on points as well. He solidified his ballot to the Hall of Fame in the future and showed why he is truly one of the premier pound-for-pound fighters of this generation. And that is my top 10 performers of this weekend in boxing.